The Missouri River has always appeared calm, steady, and timeless, a ribbon of water cutting through America's heartland. Generations have depended on it for food, transport, and power. But beneath its still surface, satellites have uncovered a secret that has shaken geologists to their core. A massive rift, an immense fracture in the Earth's crust, has been detected directly under the Missouri River Basin. The U.S. Geological Survey has now issued a rare red alert, a level of warning usually reserved for imminent disasters. What makes this discovery terrifying is not just the size of the rift, but the fact that it is widening. Millimeter by millimeter, year by year, the ground beneath the Midwest is stretching apart, and the consequences, if left unchecked, could transform the geography, economy, and safety of the central United States forever. The alarm didn't come from a sudden earthquake or a flood. It came from space. During a calibration test of ground-penetrating radar paired with synthetic aperture radar imaging, scientists noticed something unusual beneath the sediment and bedrock of the Missouri River Basin. At first, they thought it was a data error, perhaps interference from ice deposits or old mining scars. But when subsequent passes confirmed the same anomaly, skepticism gave way to shock. What they were seeing wasn't a simple crack. It was an extensive rift zone, a wide, deep gash in the Earth's crust running for hundreds of miles under the Midwest. Unlike California's steep vertical faults, this rift cut horizontally, like a seam torn open by invisible hands. Satellite readings revealed it plunges into the lithosphere, the rigid shell of the Earth, hinting at tectonic forces once thought absent from the heartland. Measurements suggest the rift's width already spans tens of miles in some places, with measurable strain pulling the crust apart by millimeters each year. That might sound insignificant, but in geological time, those millimeters accumulate into catastrophic shifts. What made the findings even more unsettling was the heat signature. Thermal anomalies suggested that hot mantle material could be rising beneath the crust. Such upwellings are the spark that, in other parts of the world, created massive rift valleys and even tore continents apart. The Missouri River discovery was no longer an anomaly. It was an unfolding tectonic event. To understand the danger, we need to know what a rift really is. Unlike a fault, which is a break between two blocks of rock, a rift represents something far larger, the crust itself being stretched and thinned until it begins to split. In geological terms, rifts are the birthplaces of oceans. The Red Sea, for example, began as a rift between Africa and Arabia. The East African Rift today is slowly tearing a continent apart. The Missouri Rift shares the same DNA. Instead of being located on a continental edge where plates collide or pull apart, this rift sits in the middle of the North American plate. It is what geologists call an intraplate rift, and such features are both rare and poorly understood. What makes it especially dangerous is its silence. There are no towering cliffs, no volcanoes, no visible scars. On the surface, everything looks stable, but deep underground, satellite models reveal a different picture. Mantle upwelling, a slow push of molten rock from below, is stretching the crust laterally. This process thins the lithosphere, weakens the bedrock, and creates space for faults to form and slip. Over time, this can trigger earthquakes, subsidence, or even the beginning of continental breakup. The Missouri Rift is essentially a ticking clock, counting down to events that could reshape the landscape. And the most unsettling part is that scientists don't yet know how fast the countdown is moving. The Midwest was never supposed to be the setting for a geological crisis. For decades, geologists described the central United States as stable ground, part of the ancient cratonic core of North America. This bedrock, more than 1 billion years old, was believed to be immune from the tectonic chaos that shapes coasts and mountain ranges. But the discovery of the Missouri Rift has shattered that assumption. One possible explanation lies buried in history, geological history. Beneath parts of the Midwest stretches the ghost of the Mid-Continent Rift, a billion-year-old fracture system that once tried and failed to split the continent apart. Though it never fully developed into an ocean, its scars remain. Many scientists now wonder, is the Missouri Rift a reactivation of that ancient wound? Others look to the southeast, toward the notorious New Madrid seismic zone. In the early 1800s, it produced some of the most powerful earthquakes in American history, shaking the Mississippi River so violently it temporarily flowed backward. Could the Missouri Rift be tied to the same stress fields feeding New Madrid? Another camp argues that something new is at work beneath the Midwest. Mantle plumes, rising columns of hot rock, are usually associated with volcanic hotspots, like Hawaii or Yellowstone. Yet thermal imaging suggests a plume-like upwelling beneath Missouri. If that's true, then this is not a reawakened fossil rift, but a fresh tectonic engine rewriting the continent from below. Whatever its origin, The message is clear. The so-called stable heart of North America is anything but. The Missouri Rift isn't just sitting quietly underground. It's active. That activity is subtle, but satellites, seismic stations, and GPS arrays are capturing it in real time. Across Missouri, Nebraska, and Kansas, sensors have picked up an increase in microquakes. These tremors are so faint that people on the surface never feel them, but when plotted on a map, they tell a chilling story. The quakes align almost perfectly with the rift's path. Seismologists call this a seismic swarm, a common precursor to larger fault activity. At the same time, ground movement data from GPS and interferometric satellites show the land itself stretching apart by just a few millimeters per year. That sounds small, but over centuries it adds up to significant deformation. To put it in perspective, the East African Rift widens at roughly the same rate, and geologists expect it to eventually form a new ocean basin. Even more troubling are the thermal anomalies. Deep radar and heat flow measurements reveal that sections of the crust above the rift are hotter than expected. This indicates thinning lithosphere, where hot mantle material rises closer to the surface. When the crust weakens like this, it becomes prone to collapse, fracturing, and seismic instability. And then there's gravity. Sensitive gravimetric studies show tiny shifts in the local gravitational field, evidence that mass is moving deep below, either rising from the mantle or shifting laterally in the crust. Combined with magnetic anomalies from borehole studies, scientists are now convinced the Missouri Rift is not a dormant scar, it is alive. The Missouri Rift isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's a looming threat to the infrastructure and livelihoods of millions. If the ground beneath the river continues to shift, the consequences could cascade across the Midwest. First, there's the river itself. The Missouri is the longest river in North America, supporting farming, shipping, and power generation. If rift activity alters its course through subsidence, bank collapse, or dam destabilization, it could cut off shipping lanes, destroy farmland, and cause catastrophic floods. Even minor changes to the river's gradient could ripple through the economy, affecting everything from barge traffic to irrigation. Second, the soil amplifies the danger. Much of the Midwest is covered in unconsolidated sediment left behind by glaciers. These soft deposits act like shock absorbers for seismic waves, but instead of dampening, they magnify the shaking. This means even moderate earthquakes could cause disproportionate damage, a lesson already written in history by the New Madrid quakes of 1811 to 1812. Third, consider the infrastructure. Unlike California or Alaska, the Midwest was never built with earthquakes in mind. Bridges, levees, pipelines, and skyscrapers lack seismic reinforcement. A rift-induced quake could buckle highways, snap rail lines, and bring down overpasses. Dams along the Missouri, vital for power and flood control, might face catastrophic stress if the ground beneath them shifts. Cities like Kansas City, Omaha, and St. Louis sit close enough to feel the rift's fury. For decades, they've planned for floods, tornadoes, and blizzards, but earthquakes? Hardly at all. That lack of preparation makes the threat all the more dangerous. In short, the Missouri Rift isn't just a geological problem, it's a human one. If the Missouri Rift were simply cracking rock, it would still be serious, but it's also threatening the lifeblood of the Midwest, water and energy. Beneath the plains lies one of the world's greatest underground resources, the Ogallala Aquifer. Stretching from South Dakota to Texas, it provides drinking water for millions and irrigation for nearly a third of America's crops. A shifting crust can warp these aquifers, creating pressure differentials that force water into new paths or cut off recharge zones entirely. In extreme cases, aquifers can rupture, releasing sudden floods underground that collapse the land above. Municipal water supplies aren't immune either. Wells drilled into stable bedrock could run dry or become contaminated if rift activity distorts flow lines. Even minor chemical changes in groundwater, like shifts in salinity or the release of trapped gases, would ripple across ecosystems, farmland, and towns. Then there's energy. The Midwest is laced with pipelines carrying oil, gas, and refined fuel, most buried just a few feet underground. If the earth warps even slightly, those lines could strain, leak, or explode. Power plants and substations, often built on unconsolidated sediment near rivers, face similar dangers if the ground beneath them shifts. The terrifying truth is that the rift threatens not just the land, but the very systems that keep the Midwest alive: its water, food, and fuel. When nature cracks open the earth, humanity usually stands back in awe. But in this case, we may be playing a part in the drama. Over the past 2 decades, the central United States has experienced a surge in seismic events tied to human activity, especially hydraulic fracturing and wastewater injection. By forcing fluids deep into the crust, these practices can lubricate old faults, lowering the stress needed for them to slip. In places like Oklahoma, quakes once rare became routine after large-scale fracking operations. Now scientists wonder if similar industrial pressures are interacting with the Missouri Rift. The region has also seen heavy groundwater pumping for agriculture, which reduces underground support and increases subsidence. Deep drilling for oil and gas could add another destabilizing factor. None of this means human activity created the rift. It's far too large and deep to be man-made. But even a natural fault system can be pushed closer to failure by outside stressors. Think of it as a loaded spring. The energy is already there, but a nudge can release it. If so, the Midwest may face a harsh reality. The very industries that power its economy and feed the world could also be accelerating a geological crisis beneath their feet. The U.S. Geological Survey doesn't issue a red alert lightly. Once the rift was confirmed, an emergency web of agencies and institutions snapped into action. First came science. USGS teams rushed to deploy denser seismic arrays across Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska. GPS sensors were recalibrated to detect ground movement at millimeter accuracy. Borehole thermometers and pressure gauges began tracking heat and stress changes in real time. The goal: to build a living map of the rift's behavior before it catches everyone by surprise. Then came the emergency managers. FEMA held urgent briefings with state officials, mapping out worst-case scenarios. Dams and levees along the Missouri were placed under heightened inspection schedules. The Army Corps of Engineers reviewed barge traffic routes, prepared for sudden channel shifts, and advised lock operators on emergency protocols. Behind the scenes, city planners and utility companies were summoned to quiet meetings. Retrofitting bridges, reinforcing water plants, and testing evacuation routes were suddenly back on the table. Midwest cities like Kansas City and Omaha, built on the assumption of stability, are now being forced to draft earthquake contingency plans. And it isn't just American scientists who are watching. Teams from Europe, Asia, and Africa are collaborating, comparing the Missouri Rift with rift zones like the East African Rift and the Baikal Rift. For the first time in history, America's interior has become a global tectonic laboratory. The message is clear. This is no longer a local anomaly. It is a national and international concern. As the data pours in, one thing is certain. The Missouri Rift has split the scientific community into camps. On one side are geologists who believe this is the reawakening of a billion-year-old scar, the mid-continent rift system. In their view, stresses transmitted from the edges of the North American plate have finally found a weak zone to exploit. Combined with isostatic rebound, the crust's slow rise after glaciers melted thousands of years ago, the ancient rift may be groaning back to life. On the other side are researchers pointing to something newer and stranger: mantle upwelling. They argue that thermal anomalies, gravity shifts, and magnetic distortions suggest a plume of hot material rising from deep inside the Earth. If correct, the Missouri Rift isn't a relic. It's the start of a new tectonic system forming in real time. Skeptics urge caution. Satellites can misread noise. Microquakes can cluster without escalation. And decades, not weeks, are usually needed to build a reliable pattern. Still, even the skeptics admit the alignment of evidence is hard to ignore. The debate matters because it shapes the future. If this is an old scar, it may settle into dormancy after releasing its stress. If it's a new mantle-driven rift, then the Midwest is at the beginning of a geologic transformation that could span millions of years. Either way, the red alert stands. The land is shifting, and humanity must adapt. The Missouri River has always been a symbol of stability, rolling calmly through farmland, feeding cities, and anchoring America's heartland. But now, beneath that quiet surface, something vast and unsettling is stirring. Satellites have revealed the scar. Microquakes are tracing its edges. Heat is rising from below. The Earth itself is speaking. What happens next may not be dramatic tomorrow, or even next year, but the clock has started ticking. Whether this rift becomes a footnote in geological history or the first sign of continental transformation, it has already forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. No place on Earth is ever truly safe from change. The calm of the Midwest is no longer guaranteed. The Missouri Rift is here, silent but relentless, a reminder that the ground beneath our feet is alive. If you found this report valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What do you think the future holds for America's hidden rift?